Being a survival game, base building is pretty important to the gameplay of Palworld. So here are my base building 101 and tips to improve your building skills in Palworld. First and foremost, location, location, location. Choosing a good spot for your base is crucial as it will determine where and how you can build buildings, affecting your pal's pathing AI, where they will and won't work, and determining which resources are available to you. So first things first, try to find as flat of an area as possible for your bases. Cliffs will of course limit where you can build, but they will also confuse your pal's AI. Now my first few bases were at the top of cliffs, and I would often find my pal stuck at the bottom of the cliff without any way to get back up, meaning they were not working on the base while I was off adventuring around Paldea. Now another bug I've run into with some cliffs is that my pal will often clip into them, getting stuck in the geometry, and the only way for me to unstuck them is to go back to my pal box, reset them, take them out, and then put them back in the base, which is kind of annoying. The next tip in regards to location is try not to place your bases too closely to fast travel points. This is more of a guideline than it is a hard no-no, as it's just a little redundant to build near fast travel points since your base is going to act as a fast travel point itself. But at the end of the day, if you find a decent base location and it's near a fast travel point, it's not going to be game shattering. Just build where you want to build realistically. Now besides a nice piece of flatland, what also makes a good base location are the available resources in the surrounding area. I like to build in areas where the 4 main resources of the game are easily accessible and abundant, and I typically prioritize these 4 resources in this order. First is ore, because it's needed for almost everything once you hit the early mid game, and unlike wood and stone, there aren't buildings that you can just place around your base to farm it right on the base. Second is paldium. Now paldium fragments can be crafted from stone at the crusher building, and stone is pretty easy to stock up on, so having readily available paldium veins nearby isn't crucial as you progress into the mid and end game, but it is nice to have nearby sometimes, as you can just run out and grab some extra pallium if you need to make some more pal spheres. Then tied for third and fourth are stone and wood. Once you unlock the buildings to farm these on your base, which is I think the lumbering building, the lumberyard and the stone, I don't know what they're called, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Once you unlock the building for them though and build them, being close to naturally occurring wood and stone are not really a necessity anymore, since if you put a couple of pals that only have lumbering or mining to work on your base, you can pretty quickly stockpile thousands of wood and stone from these buildings alone, and then just toss them into a storage box that you place right beside the buildings. And then some last little tips on base locations. This blue circle surrounding your base indicates where your pals will and won't work. Anything inside the circle, your base pals will mine, farm, build, and or defend. I know to some of you that might seem a little obvious, but there's probably somebody out there who just learned that for the first time. And lastly, pal's pathing is not that great. It was fixed a little in a recent patch, but they still do get stuck and confused sometimes. So try not to have narrow corridors and walkways between your base buildings, as these will especially trip up the larger and bulkier pals from time to time. Anything a pal will be using regularly, like crafting tables, smithing furnaces, and cooking pots, should have a decent amount of space around them for pals to work, and ideally you might want to place them even outside so they have as much space as possible, and you don't have to worry about pals getting stuck in a building somewhere. Also, make sure to place your buildings and crafting stations the right direction. Destroying a building gives you the full resource cost back, so if you realize you place a building backwards and now your pals can't access it, just deconstruct it and then place it the correct orientation. Now next up is just some basic building 101s. You can continuously build by pressing Y on the controller or right mouse button on the mouse and keyboard. This is most useful when placing foundations, walls, plantations, and crafting stations. And then to disassemble finished buildings, press R3 on a controller or C on your keyboard while in the building menu. If you're having trouble placing a building straight, you can rotate it so the building is vertical to your character. This will kind of give you an easier view to see exactly how straight the building is actually going in parallel to whatever you're trying to place it up against, maybe a wall or the edge of a foundation. This works especially well when placing crafting tables, assembly lines, and defensive walls. I definitely use this a lot when placing assembly lines because they're huge, they're long, and I can never seem to place them correctly if I have them facing me horizontally. Now, finding a perfectly flat base is not always as easy as it sounds, and to be honest, I think 2 of my bases now are not exactly on fully flat spaces. So if you do ever need to build on uneven terrain, foundations are a great way to give you a flat building area. This is especially useful when placing defensive walls and gates, as it will make all the walls and the gate set at the same level, then you can just place stairways down. Staying on the same point as foundations, if you have a cliff or a hill or something and you need to extend the building area for yourself a little bit, you can sometimes finagle a few foundations right at the edge of that cliff to line up exactly flush with the ground, and it'll give you maybe 2 or 3 foundations lengths away of a building area to extend for your building if you need to build anything off a cliff. So it's usually good practice to build some storage boxes near your POW box so that you can easily fast travel to your base and move resources as quickly as possible. Now this pairs nicely with the grappling hook, as you can fast travel, grapple over to the boxes that you have set up, and then grapple back to the POW box to fast travel again. Also, on a side note, the grappling hook is just awesome in general. I almost always have it ready to go if I'm at my base, because you can just zip, zam, and zoom all over the place, and you kind of feel a little bit like Spider-Man. Now, speaking of resource management between bases, since we get a maximum of 3 bases, you're going to want to specialize your bases for specific tasks. You're definitely going to need a mining and smelting base. Now this is just a must, as metal ingots and mine ingredients as a whole are needed to craft basically everything in the game. So you're definitely going to want a base set up mainly to focus on metal and stone, and eventually as you get further in the game, sulfur and maybe coal. You'll also probably want a farm and breeding ranch. Now this is where you're going to be farming ingredients for your cakes and of course breeding POWs. Breeding is a great way to get new POWs, as you can breed 2 completely different POWs and get a 3rd completely different POW from the egg, which is wild and is a pretty cool mechanic. Now you can use this to get hard to find POWs and even ones that you haven't captured yet. And there just so happens to be a great breeding calculator on game8.co that I've been using for all my combos, so I'm going to drop that link in the video description below, so check it out if you need a breeding calculator. And now your 3rd base can be an industrial base where a bunch of production and assembly lines happen. This one's pretty straightforward. You need to craft a lot of stuff in Palworld, so having a base solely dedicated to that with POWs that have the highest handiwork level is obviously just going to make your life so much easier. Now obviously you don't have to specialize each of your bases like this, but it's generally a good mindset to have when setting up a new base, since the space you have for your bases is limited and you want to consider what you really want this base to do so you can build smartly. And one good way to build smartly to maximize your space is to build vertically. Currently there seems to be no limit to vertical building in the game, so if you can dream it, you can build it. The sky is quite literally the limit, and when you build it, you're definitely going to want to build it with stone as soon as possible. Wood buildings will burn and take damage over time, and as you go through the game, you're going to start getting raided by a lot of POWs that actually use fire and people that use fire, which I guess makes sense. If you're raiding a building, you probably want to build fire. You probably want to use fire. So unless you want your bases reduced to a pile of rubble, upgrade to stone ASAP. In fact, I would just say don't even try to build too much with wood and just try to get to stone buildings as fast as possible, and then just start building with that, because right now you can't replace old buildings, like old foundations and walls, with new ones, so you can't just upgrade like that. You have to like completely demolish everything and then rebuild it. Now my last tip for the video has to do with world settings. If possible, I recommend turning off building decay in your world settings. This will let you build things like walls, especially defensive walls, which I find I like to put them outside my base a lot of times, and this will let you do that without having to worry about them slowly decaying over time and then breaking down. This is also pretty useful if you want to have like a little kind of on-the-go hut to use as a little outpost if you're out exploring and you need just like a little space to like maybe store some stuff and put a bed in so you can sleep through the night if you don't want to explore through the night. I'm 50-50 on the night. Sometimes I don't like it because it's too dark, and sometimes I'm like, you know, I got stuff to do. Let me get it done through the night. But yeah, I usually turn off building decay because I like to build little things outside of my base sometimes, and I don't like them to just decay on me. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this one, folks. So if you found any of these tips useful, drop a like to let me know, and if you want more Palworld videos, subscribe because I got much more on the way. And I will catch y'all next time.